Good evening. We have completed another day of the National Recount exercise. As you are aware, we are counting only Region 4 ballots now. I think Region 6 is completed. No, I think we are still counting Region 6. But today we have completed 76 ballot boxes. Um, we expected that the speed would have been greater, but unfortunately, as we are coming to the end, the pace is decreasing. But in all fairness, um, the boxes that are now being counted are relatively large boxes. So we are not too worried about that, and we are pleased that the recount is proceeding to the end. A lot of time would have elapsed since we last spoke, and a lot of things have happened and a lot of things have been said. Of course, it's not my intention to rehash all the issues or to address all the issues, except to say that the narrative of APNU AFC has not changed. In fact, it has intensified as we expect it to do. As the recount enters its final stages, most naturally, Mingo's massive fraud is being unraveled every day. Some nearly 20 boxes on the East Coast already have shown the gravity and magnitude of the fraud perpetrated by Mingo. And also, what is being established slowly but very clearly is that the APNU AFC lost the elections, and the margin that the PPP disclosed from the inception, that it won the elections by some 15,000 votes, that is slowly being established. As a result, APNU AFC, their desperation reaching fever pitch now, and they have intensified their allegations. As I have articulated in an article which was published, and perhaps I may have said this to you over and over again, the election is a statutory process. Every step of this election is laid down in a statute, and if there is any violation anywhere along these statutory provisions, the law says that these violations must be taken to a court, the High Court in particular, and adjudicated upon by an elections petition. That jurisdiction is exclusively created by the Constitution and given to the High Court. GCOM has no investigative powers, it has no adjudicatory powers to deal with or determine any of these allegations. The law is very simple. Once the ballot paper is authentic, once it is clearly marked, once it is duly authorized, then and it is properly marked so that you can determine which party the voter intended to vote for, then the law says that everything else is secondary and the will of the voter preponderates. And that is the principle by which GCOM is bound in a recount, and any commission for that matter. That is what the principles of law say. And it is not unique to Guyana. Recount A recount is a regular component or an ordinary component of an electoral process. Recounts take place regularly across the world whenever there is an election. So it is nothing unique, and the law in relation to Guyana is not peculiar. It is the same law that obtains in most of the Commonwealth territories. And the law says that objections such as polling books missing, entries not made in a polling book, ballots not put in some envelopes where they're supposed to be put, if you vote with ink instead of pencil, and things like that, they are all matters. They are, first of all, they are all subservient to the majesty of the mark on the ballot. And once that ballot, as I said, is authentic, once it is authorized, meaning that it has the authorized stamp on it, and it's clearly marked in favor of a political party, that ballot must be given the preeminent consideration over everything else in an electoral process, because the will of the electorate must prevail over everything else, because that is the purpose of an election. A purpose of an election is an opportunity given to a voter to elect a government of his or her choice. And the expression through which that voter speaks is the ballot. If through the negligence or omission of some election official, some procedure is not complied with, it cannot and it does not affect the validity of the ballot. And the law says, in any event, when these irregularities take place, then you go to an election court and you have to establish them. You have to prove them. And it's not an ordinary standard of proof, it's a heavy standard of proof. You have to prove it almost beyond reasonable doubt, the criminal standard. And in a court, you lead the evidence, the other side rebuts it, the other side gets an opportunity to cross-examine your witnesses, etc. And then the court makes a determination. And you still have an added burden. Even if you establish an irregularity or an illegality, you next have to prove that that particular irregularity materially affected the results of the election. So the burden is a twofold burden. Not only must you establish the irregularity that you are claiming beyond a reasonable doubt or a threshold close to that, but also you must go on to show that it materially affected the result of an election. So, for example, let us say you have, 10 invalid ballots that were found by the court to have been counted as valid ballots here, but in the court they were established as invalid ballots. And the PVP wins by 15,000. Then your petition will be dismissed simply because it will not affect the results of the election. 10 ballots would make no impact in a total of 15,000. So I say that to put into perspective all the irrelevance that APNU AFC has been bombarding the Elections Commission with. And I say that also to reject a very dangerous argument I see presented here yesterday by Commissioner Vincent Alexander, who argued here that GCOM must determine the credibility of elections. That is not GCOM's function at a recount. That is not GCOM functions, period. No man can be a judge in his own cause. GCOM can't judge its own process. GCOM managed the electoral process, no other agency. And GCOM can't sit to judge themselves in any event. But more particularly and more importantly, the Constitution says that only the High Court has the exclusive, and note the word, exclusive jurisdiction to hear and determine any allegation of irregularity and negligent conduct or actions at an election. And the cases, when you go through them across the world, will show you that no action of any election officer, be it a returning officer, a presiding officer, or a poll clerk, will ever be used to invalidate the vote of an elector. Never. Those persons can be disciplined separately, but their actions or omissions will never impugn the validity of a voter. So what Alexander said last night is completely wrong. And Alexander went on to make some points that he is of the view that there were certain irregularities committed and proved. I don't know proof to whose satisfaction and what proof he is using. If he believes that he's sitting in a court and he can hear one side and don't hear the other side. If you are attempting to impugn the vote of 90,000 people, as I understand they're saying, it's 90,000 persons who have to be heard at a proper forum, not this forum, in a court where they can properly be heard and where the tribunal has the power to hear them, not here. So we are confident that Justice Singh understands the nature of her functions and the extent of her responsibilities and powers, and we trust that at the appropriate time she will advise herself in accordance with the law. I want to take this opportunity to also comment briefly on a statement I see APNU AFC has touched onto, which I made, about fraud vitiates everything. Now that's a statement of law. That's a statement of law that fraud vitiates everything. And I was specifically referring to Mingo's declaration, which are fraudulent. Now it's quite strange that APNU AFC quoting me. I have also said that they have lost the elections. I have also said that they are part and parcel of Mingo's fraud. I have also said that they are holding on to government illegally. Why they don't accept my legal advice then? So they conveniently pluck two statements out of context in relation to what I said and holding on to that for dear life, putting it in their press statements and all sorts of things. If they are alleging fraud, they have to go to the court and establish fraud. And if they are able to do so, well then that's a matter for the court. That is not a matter for here. And I was speaking specifically only of Mingo's fraud. So I thought that I'll put that to rest. Today, another development took place here, which is being blown out of proportion by APNU AFC. Now, as you know, on elections day, I had responsibility, among other persons, for the east coast of Demerara, and they are counting the east coast of Demerara. And I'm pleased to say that we won the east coast of Demerara by several thousand votes. Several thousands. But that's not the issue. The issue is that in a particular geographic area, I think between Vrijslas and LBI, the DROs who were presiding on elections day, the deputy returning officers of that geographic area, took it upon themselves to uplift from the presiding officers certain materials that they ought not to have uplifted from those POs. The poll book and a whole set of all the other documents. Mr. Lowenfield, the chief elections officer, in all fairness to him, prepared upon our insistence a spreadsheet which set out certain rules that each presiding officer ought to govern themselves by on elections day. In this area, however, these district deputy returning officers, I don't know, either deliberately or unintentionally, decided to arrogate unto themselves a power to lay down some new rules. They disregarded the CEO's directions, and they put all these materials in a separate package or in separate packages and transmitted them to the RO. And what was left in the ballot boxes were only the ballots. This issue was drawn to our attention since election night. And as I was required to do, I draw it to Mr. Mingo's attention, who was the RO at the time. Mr. Mingo represented to me that he's aware of the problem, that it is a mistake made by the DRO, that it was a procedural error, that it will not obviously affect the substance and cannot obviously affect the votes, but is something that he will sort out administratively because he has the documents. I spoke to Mr. Lowenfield during the course of today because he was informed of this issue since then by Mingo, because Mingo confirmed to me that he spoke with Lowenfield. Mr. Lowenfield confirmed that he has custody of all these documents and that they were wrongly excluded from the ballot box or ballot boxes, and he has them. But somewhere yesterday, someone from the secretariat, I believe, mischievously advised the operators of the workstations to insert into the observation report language to suggest that the votes and the recount are invalidated. Unfortunate language, because there is no one in that building who can invalidate a ballot except if that ballot is a forgery, or if it has multiple marks, or if it is on stamps. Those are the only three reasons that a ballot can be invalidated in accordance with the rules of a recount. From the beginning of this exercise, we have had things missing from the ballot boxes. Since we started Region 1, you had instances of poll book missing. You had instances of some envelope not properly sealed, or some ballot box not properly sealed. That never affected the validity of the votes. They were recorded in the observation report, which is the correct thing to do, and the counting of the votes proceeded with and duly tabulated in the end. But suddenly, we are hearing of a narrative constructed by Harman speaking about invalid votes, and suddenly, and I don't believe coincidentally, someone in the secretariat advised the workstations that this language, this peculiar language, must be constructed and expressed in the observation report, which purports to say on its face that the votes are invalid and the recount is invalid. Now, that is totally wrong, and we believe that it is part of an unholy conspiracy. And we have drawn that to the attention of Mr. Lowenfield and the Commission. And hopefully tomorrow, fortunately, the Commission decided to put the boxes aside that were affected, and hopefully tomorrow they will be sorted out and the process can resume orderly and in the ordinary way how they were proceeding. I have here, coincidentally, a Facebook posting from one of the persons who worked in the same area, and this is what she posted on her Facebook page on this very matter. I want to read it to you. Give me 1 second, let me. 1 second. Yes. This person, you can check your Facebook page. She has a photograph here, Wendy Ann. Wendy Ann, she calls herself. And she says this: throughout this entire election shenanigans, I chose to remain quiet. But now that the polling place which I worked at was brought into question, I cannot keep quiet anymore. On behalf of the presiding officers that worked at Montrose Primary School, please note that this is a lie. She's referring to what is being peddled. All documents for the 6 polling stations at Montrose School were submitted to the DRO as per instructions by the clerk to the RO. The original SOP attached would explain the desperation of the lie. So this is a presiding officer who is explaining that they received instructions to put these things separately, and they complied with those instructions. So it is a mere innocuous irregularity which is being magnified, and that is the desperation of APNU AFC, being magnified to gigantic proportions to suggest that there is some wrongdoing. There is no wrongdoing. The ballots are in the box, and the statements of poll are accurate. They reflect accurately what transpired at the station. The ancillary documents and miscellaneous documents were wrongfully separated and conveyed separately to the RO, where they are in the custody now of GCOM, as they should be. So Lowenfield promised to bring them tomorrow to the commission, but whether he brings them or not, in my view, that is immaterial. The commission has already ruled. The commission has already ruled that every ballot that is stamped will be counted, and whatever irregularity were attendant at that station will be recorded in the observation report. That is the golden rule which will not be departed from. Every ballot, once it has the stamp and therefore was an authorized ballot, and it is not a forged ballot paper, and it is properly marked by the voter, must be counted. And that is GCOM's golden rule that they set out and laid down from the inception of this exercise. And that is what will govern this issue. So I will stop there now and invite your questions if you have any.
Yes, Mr. Nandlall. Could you say how many boxes you were hearing between 21 and 23? And could you say how many ballots these boxes make up?
I don't know the number, but I know the geographic area, right? But it should be about 10 to 15 ballot boxes. Some of them were passed already. It's just a few that were held back. Some of them were tabulated.
Could you say the combined number of ballots, or you
No, I would not. Somebody will have to check that. But they are for the areas that I identified.
Mr. Nandlall, a couple of questions. The ballot boxes are in the counting stations, right, or they were there, and just the ballots. What then is the purpose of the statutory documents if they have no meaning in validating the ballots cast? Right, because you must have something to validate that these ballots were cast.
So let me answer that. I am not saying that they don't have any meaning. Obviously, these are legal instruments that the law provided must be used and utilized in an election. So of course they have value. They are not valueless. However, the law goes on to say that the absence of them or inaccurate entries being made in relation to them would not invalidate a ballot. Because a voter is an innocent person. I go into a polling station to vote. I don't know the presiding officer. I don't know the polling agent. I don't know the assistant presiding officer. All I am there for is to vote for the political party of my choice, a right that the law has given me. And I am going there to exercise that right. The law protects my vote by not making my vote subject to the errors of those over whom I have no control and who are not acting under my directions.
Would you say that that same principle applies then to the on-stamp ballot, which is not an action by the voter, but by the administration?
That is why I keep saying there is one exception, and that is the on-stamp ballot. You know why? Because there is simply no way for one to verify that that ballot was actually issued and that somebody did not come unauthorizedly and put it in the box. You see, that, and I'm glad that you point that out, that is an exception to the rule. And that is why I began my presentation by highlighting that. But that is inherent to the ballot itself. But anything that is extraneous to the ballot will not be used to contaminate, invalidate, or nullify the ballot.
Let's say, perchance, that the materials to authenticate the ballots in these 21 ballot boxes are not recovered.
No, so you're using the wrong language. These are not things that will authenticate the ballot. The ballot remains an authenticated ballot once it has the security mark, once it has the stamp. It means authenticated means that it is one of the ballots authorized to be used by the election, so it has a security measure. They put that against the screen. That's the first test. Secondly, that it was duly authorized to be used in the polling station by the affixation of that 6-digit stamp or a part thereof.
Okay.
Once those two requirements are satisfied, then that ballot is authenticated. Its validity is not dependent upon anything extraneous to that.
But there must be, because the counterfiles are not there, right? And the counting agents at the recount station will want something to show that, well, okay, at least the counterfiles that these ballots were issued at polling station X.
All right.
T, right?
Yes, yes.
Right? Let's say, for example, they're not able to reconcile those ballots with the requisite documents, statutory documents, and your party stand to lose thousands of votes. How will this affect your victory?
Now let me explain to you that you're skipping a big step in the process. These ballots were counted on elections night, when all the paperwork was there, when all the materials were there, and there was not a single issue. And that was how the SOP was compiled, smoothly, without any error and any adverse remark. All right? It is after that process was completed, and there is no issue about it. The totals, everything balanced, counterfoil, everything balanced. It is after that process was completed, when the presiding officer now was going to do her duty, as one of them explained, they got a direction from the DRO to take certain materials to the DRO and for it to be taken to the RO separately. Now you tell me, common sense and logic, how would that ever, those circumstances ever, invalidate a ballot? It can't. It can't.
They're doing a recount.
Yes.
To determine the credibility and how those ballots were cast, how they arrived in ballot boxes. And it's like if they're doing the election count over again. don't you agree that there needs to be at that point there and then supporting documents, the basic supporting documents, counterpoint the list,
My friend,
you know, to say
yeah,
that, okay,
I just told you that Mr. Lowen, it's not that the documents are missing. They are not. They are not missing.
They can't find them.
Well, when we reach that stage, then we will have to argue, because somebody will have to show how that invalidates the ballot. That is how you will have to show how it invalidates the ballot. When the universal principle accepted by the commission is that a ballot can only become invalid if it is unstamped or you can't decipher the intent of the voter. You can't come now and make a new rule. But let us not speculate. The documents are in the custody of GCOM and will be brought here.
Will you say that there's been a pattern now because there are, in the other regions, we would have heard of missing statutory documents, right? And now we move to East Coast and we're hearing of those documents again. Even we should practically all the regions, you know, they are missing statutory documents. And would you consider that a pattern?
I don't know whether it's a pattern, but I will tell you that the irregularities that are being unearthed here are not peculiar to Guyana or to these elections. If you have attended recounts anywhere in the world, you will see errors like this. The OAS and the European Union, both in their statements, spoke to this issue. That what is being unearthed here are nothing novel. They are in the course of any recount, they will emerge. Even in very, very small countries, like St. Kitts and so on, where you have just sometimes 200 votes in a constituency. And when you check the votes, and there are recorded cases in the law reports, where these cases had to go to court, and you had irregularities and so on. I wrote an article which is out in the press now. You will see how I detailed some of the cases and gave very identical examples of what they are raising here being dealt with in those cases.
Mr. Nandlall, are you concerned at all that as a supervisor for East Coast and with this what is happening now and the revelation that you had contact with the DROs and all of that, are you concerned that there might be some conflict of interest or the talk or allegations of collusion?
The votes, my friend, that are being affected are PPP votes. Are you suggesting that mainly the 9 or 10 boxes that are affected are PPP strongholds? It is APNU, AFC who have canvassed for that report to be written in that inaccurate way. And we are trying to change that. So how would I be acting in collusion against my own interest? No, man. That's it? Thank you very much.